Are you using the correct loft driver to maximize your tee shots? Right then, so I did a video yesterday where I was talking about my new driver and talking about how I'd been fitted about 7 or 8 weeks ago, and everything was absolutely perfect. But since then, I'd made a few little adjustments with my golf swing, and my delivery of the golf club was a little different. Therefore, I was having to actually change the loft of my driver. And it got me thinking about how many of you guys out there are using the wrong loft driver, maybe costing yourself yardage. You might be using too much, might not be using enough loft. So what I'm going to do in today's video, I'm going to take a 10.5 degree head that I can take down to 9 and up to 12. So I'm going to hit shots at 9, shots at 10.5, and shots at 12 degrees. And I'm going to show you the difference that those tiny little adjustments in loft make to how you launch the ball, how it spins, how quick the ball comes off the face, and ultimately how far you hit driver. Right, and so through my coaching and fitting, I see this as a huge issue with guys coming using the wrong loft with driver. I think sometimes it's very ego driven. You know, some guys predominantly don't use enough loft and feel that a driver has to be at 8 or 9 degrees, and then kind of going the other end, they kind of don't want to go to 11.5, 12, because they feel it's getting close to being a 2 wood. Remember, driver's the big head, the long shaft. It's about launching the ball, ideally for you, maximizing your speed off the club face and getting you hitting it as far as possible. So for today's test, I'm going to use the G410 Plus from Ping. The only reason I'm not using my driver is it's a standard 9 degree head, so I can only go down to 7.5, up to 10.5. And I think for more of the golfers out there, starting at 10.5, maybe down to 9 or up to 12 is maybe a more realistic change in what we're going to do. So I'm going to hit a handful of shots with each loft. I'm going to show you a little bit of ball flight and see if the kind of trajectories look a little bit different. But then we're really going to dive into the numbers and see maybe you might need to change the loft to driver. So 10.5 degree to start with. Certainly as I put it behind the golf ball, it looks more lofted than I would normally use. Off we go. And I'd be pretty happy with all of those. So before we dive into any numbers though, I'm going to move straight across and change the loft. So just going to adjust it really, really easy. I'm not playing around with the weights here. I'm going to leave the weights directly in the middle. All of those are good solid strikes out the middle of the golf club. Really easy to adjust. Okay, so all done. Move from 10.5 to 9 degrees. So I know changing the loft going to slightly change the line angle, so club face position might be a little different, so we might see very slight difference in shapes of shots, but this is more about performance off the face. Might talk a little bit more in detail in another video about how the adjustability of the heads can correct the shape of shots you've got. But we've gone from 10.5 down to 9. What are we expecting? Maybe a slightly lower ball flight. Right, so the ball flight didn't look massively different for me without looking at numbers. Maybe just a little bit kind of lower. Felt a bit quicker off the club face, but I don't know, we'll wait and see on that one. That might just be me through doing a lot of fittings, maybe talking myself into that. So we're going to go from 9 now and move all the way up to 12. And let's see how the driver performs with the extra loft. Right, so as I put that down behind the ball, I can see a lot of the club face. That is a lot more than I've seen for a long time with the driver. But let's try and make normal swings and let's see what happens. Right, so I thought just off ball flight there, that definitely looked like it launched higher, flew higher, and looked a lot softer with the way it flew. But let's look at some numbers. Let's really dive into this now and see how the different loft on the driver is affecting the performance of the golf ball. Right, so let's look at the numbers. So club head speed, as you would expect, was pretty similar. Had 105 at 10.5, had 104.5 at 9, and 104 at 12. So then we look at ball speed. At 10.5, I had 151.5. At 9, I had 152. And at 12, we dropped down to 149. So we see launch angle. Actually, at 9 degrees, I launched at 11.9. 11.7 with 10.5, but up to 13 with the 12 degree. And when we look at backspin, actually had just under 2,100 at 10.5, just under 2,000 at 9, but 3,000 at 12. And we look at the way I delivered the golf club, I was pretty much 3 degrees up with all of those. So then we go into the distances. So carry at 10.5 was just under 242, 273 total. 248 and 279 at 9. And then we look at 238 and 258 with 12 degrees. So if we look at the strike with the 12 degree, absolutely where I'd want, slightly above the centre line, but right in the middle of the club face. 9 degree was actually a little bit higher up the club face. Now, that's going to give me a little bit more loft, which is why that one maybe just launched a little bit higher than I would have expected. And the 10.5, very similar in strike to the 9. You know, a little higher up that club face, and again, that launching the ball a little bit higher and keeping that spin down. Right, so what did we see from the numbers there? So, obviously very aware that if we don't hit it at the exact same point, which nobody does, we're going to see slight differences in kind of launch angle and spin because of that. But we saw with me that certainly the 9 and the 10.5 were incredibly close. Now, what I would have said is both of those I hit a little bit higher up the face, which will have kept the spin down a little bit. And we did see that with those numbers, potentially the 9 degree setting was actually just marginally too low for spin with me. But I think if the strike was a little bit closer to where it was with the 12, and there was a half a dozen shots there, you know, so it was consistent, but if it was a little bit lower, I think the 9 degree would have just launched a little bit lower, maybe just spun a touch more, not a massive amount, but maybe for me with the new way I'm delivering the golf club, we're seeing certainly with this driver, I might be in between the 9 and 10.5. You know, certainly we saw with my driver, with my video I did the other day, that certainly adding a little bit of extra loft helped, kept a bit of spin on the ball, kept it in the air. But what we did see was that there is a real danger when the spin gets low, that you can be a little bit kind of more left to right dispersion, because something called your spin loft, so the difference between the angle of tackle of the club And the launch angle, the smaller that V gets, if you're a little bit offline, you do hit it wider. So there is a tendency there that maybe the 10.5 setting would be my most consistent, if not quite my longest. But we saw a huge drop off when I went up to 12. And we're only talking about 1.5 degrees either way in Loft. So it sounds such a tiny amount, but it really can make such a huge difference to the way we hit driver. And like I said at the start of the video, for me, most golfers end up probably using not enough loft. And they probably don't get the ball in the air, get enough spin, and then they end up building something in their swing without realizing to get the ball in the air. And that's where we start seeing lots of slices, missed strikes, you know, and really, a lot of golfers out there, you might be one of them, will say I'm very, very consistent with my irons, my fairway woods are pretty good, but when I get into driver, it's a completely different beast. So make sure the driver's got the correct loft on it. Now, ultimately, that's about getting along and getting fitted. I'm not saying you necessarily need to buy a new driver. You know, the beauty with a lot of the modern stuff, even the stuff that's 4 or 5 years old, is still very, very good product if it's the right one for you. In a fitting, you can get your driver adjusted, any movable weights, to be at its best setting for you. It might not be the perfect one, but you can definitely get more out of your current driver than you probably are. And for most guys, getting the correct loft is going to make the biggest difference to hitting the ball further and more accurately. So guys, hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, like and share it, comment below and I'll get back to as many people as I can. If you've enjoyed today's video and you don't currently subscribe, please click the subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and then you find out whenever I drop a new video. Follow me on all my social media platforms, all under Ali Taylor Golf. Hopefully catch up with some of you guys down here soon. Stay in contact.